Over here.
Sir, I'm Charles Stansfield. I just finished a 4-year term as second vice chair of the Montgomery County, Maryland Republican Party.
This man is a masochist. Thank you for doing it.
It's the second most lonely job in Montgomery County after being a Maytag repairman. But my question is not a softball. Rather, I would tell you that the most frequent complaint that we've received on our answering machine over these past 4 years, when we would come in the morning, is complaints from Republicans who were calling to complain about open borders and illegal immigration. I know what happened to California when Pete Wilson tried to do something about it. But what is the solution for the administration and for the country?
First of all, the solution is to get the facts out and for people to understand what we're doing. Over the last 12 months, over 1.3 million people were apprehended at the border and returned. The 30-year policy of the governments of this country, Republican and Democrat, called catch and release. If you were an OTM and other than Mexican, and we caught you in the United States of America, until July of this year, the process was, we got you, and since we didn't have enough bed space to hold you, we released you with a little piece of paper with your court date on it, and 92% of the people didn't show up for their court date. And this administration, starting in 2001, began to do two things. We began to build a lot more facilities, and we sped up the removal of people from this country. When we came into office, it took 93 days to process somebody out of the country. It's now 19 days and shrinking. We got a lot more beds. You get a lot more beds and get them out of the country in 1/4 of the time, and you're able to do what we did in July, in the last week of July, and have continued since then. Since the end of July, every single person that we've gotten inside the United States who's other than a Mexican has been returned out of the country or put in a detention facility until we can. We have ended the policy of catch and release and made it catch and return. Now, there are 4 things that we need to do. First, we need to finish the job of securing our border, and we are spending a vast amount of money in order to do so. We're going to double the size of the Border Patrol, and we're tripling its budget. By the time this president leaves office, he will have doubled the size of the Border Patrol and tripled the size of its budget, and that doesn't include the capital costs. We're building fences and vehicle barriers and sensor nets and lighting systems and terraforming so that we literally change the landscape and building all weather road all along the border, doing whatever is necessary to get control of the border. That's one thing we got to do. Second thing we got to do, though, is we got to do something about changing the habits of people who come here and are working illegally. And during the decade in the 90s, the theory was what we're going to do is we are going to let those people, if you hire somebody illegally and we catch you, we're going to fine you $225. And as a result, everybody priced that into the cost of doing business. Instead, we said we're going to form 10 criminal task forces in key cities across the country and search out people who are knowingly hiring large numbers of illegal aliens and go after them with criminal charges and criminal penalties. And the first group that we busted on this was nearly 1,000, nearly 1,300 people working in a pallet company who are illegal. The third thing we got to do is we got to do something, though, about providing a way for people to come here as guest workers to do jobs that Americans need to have done, that we cannot find Americans to do. We got successful programs like this all over the country today. In fact, one of them is in Michigan, in the upper Midwest. It's a seasonal program that allows people to come here in order to work in the camps, the resorts that are open for only part of the year in the upper Midwest. And it works spectacularly. But we got to have some way for us to take a willing employer and a willing worker and link them together so that people can come here to work. Because when you can make 50 cents an hour in Mexico and 10 bucks an hour in the United States slinging tar or digging a ditch, you're going to be coming for the 10 bucks an hour every day of the week. And we got to find some way to break that routine of you saying, I'm going to get there by paying somebody money to get me up there illegally and then hide in the society. I want you to think about the consequences of this. I'm from Texas. In the early part of the 90s, you could hire a coyote to get you across the Rio Grande River for about 150 bucks. You know what the cost is today? $1,500 to $2,000. Now, the price has not gone up because it's gotten easier. It's gone up because we made it a lot tougher to get across the border. So what happens? Some guy puts together that money, and it goes into the hands of a criminal enterprise, and they get him across the border, and he gets a job, and Dad dies, and he can't go home because he's scared to do so. And little sister gets married, and he can't go home. Little brother graduates from high school, and he can't go home. Holidays come and go, and he can't go home. He can send him money, but he can't go home. And 5 or 10 years after he's been stuck here in the United States, he wakes up and says, you know what? I really have no connection to that dusty little town in Mexico. I'm not going home. And what we've got to do is put a system in place so that somebody who wants to come here to work can come here to work for a period of time. We know when they're coming in. We know when they're going out. Where they can go back and cross the border during a period of time with some kind of identification that allows us to capture that information and keep those connections up so that when they put together their little nest egg, they can go home. And if we don't do that, there is no amount of money and no amount of Border Patrol that is going to keep people from coming across the border. The resources are going to be spread far too thin for us to get the problem under control. So we need to have a comprehensive approach. And the final thing that we got to do, we got to figure out some practical, realistic way to deal with people who have been here for some period of time and have developed connections to the community and have kept their nose clean. And I know that's unpopular. But if you've been here for 5 or 10 years and you got a family, it is unrealistic to think that the answer is for us to say, you're out of here. You know, I started to keep a file about the kid who graduates from Princeton and can't go study at Oxford because he's an illegal alien. The valedictorian or the salutatorian of a high school class who's an illegal alien. The guy who saves the people from the burning apartment who's an illegal alien. We've got to find a way to deal with these people in a compassionate way to say there's a difference between somebody who came here yesterday and somebody who came here 10 years ago, somebody who's by themselves and somebody who's got a family, and there's a difference between somebody who has kept their nose clean and somebody who hasn't. And if you want to stay here, then you got to pay a fine, you got to work and keep your nose clean, and you got to go to the back of the line to become a citizen. And then the final thing that we got to do, and we better get about this task, is we better make sure that anybody who becomes a U.S. citizen is assimilated in our society. The citizenship test is a joke. People who come here ought to know English, know our history, and know our culture. You know, I was talking with the cardinal in Los Angeles about the need to assimilate. That any program of immigration reform has to have assimilation. He said, you know what, we're good at that. America has done that, and he's absolutely right. We did it with the Germans. We did it with the Irish. We did it with the Central Europeans. For God's sake, we even did it with the Swedes. I say that as the highest-ranking Norwegian American in the White House. In fact, I say that as the only Norwegian American in the White House. But we've got to have a comprehensive approach. We got to solve all components of it if we're going to get this job done. And if we don't, we're going to see simply more of what we're seeing on the southern border, and that is people coming across because they're desperate to make the life that they think they can get in the United States of America.